In this video, I'm going to show you how you can get a job without any experience as an international student. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I know a lot of international students have a lot of challenges trying to get a job after college, especially when you're counting on a work visa situation. So stay tuned and I'll tell you what I would suggest for you. Hey, welcome back to Michael's Business English. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michael Rincon, and I'm a former six-figure data analyst turned ESL instructor and career coach. If you are new to this channel, here we talk about business English, communications, and career development. So if you're into that, make sure you like and subscribe, and all the links that we mentioned in this video you can find in the description box below. So a quick disclosure, a little about me. I have not had the challenge of having to try and get a job after college as an international student. I was born in America and I've been in America most of my life. So when I graduated college, I didn't have to deal with the work visa situation. So it might be kind of weird for me to be giving suggestions and advice. However, trust me when I tell you that I've done the research and I've helped tons of students out who are international students as well as international job seekers with their career development. So I feel confident that I can help you. I feel confident that the advice I'm going to give you is going to be helpful for you because I've done the research and I've helped other students in the past. So don't worry if you're like, who is this guy? Michael doesn't know what I'm going through. The other thing you should know is that after I transitioned from being a data analyst to being an ESL instructor, I did have to go through the work visa nightmare. And that does become a challenge when you're looking for jobs because you want to make sure not only are you trying to find a job that's a good fit, you also have to deal with all the legal repercussions and challenges that come with trying to get a work visa. So even though like I'm an ESL teacher and it's technically a little bit easier to get a job as an ESL instructor overseas, there are still challenges involved because it's still a fairly competitive environment. So keep that in mind that I don't necessarily know exactly what you're going through, but I've done the research and I've helped others and I've gone through similar experiences with regards to my job search. So the very first thing I'm going to suggest to you right now is that if your goal is to get a job overseas in another country, whether it's in the US, the UK, Canada, wherever your goal is, that is your number one problem that you need to address. And you need to become an expert on your work visa or your student visa, because if you don't know the visa stuff, you can get yourself in trouble later down the line if you get a job offer from an employer who doesn't follow the process correctly. And that might sound kind of weird, like why would an employer do that? Well, my experience has taught me when I was trying to get a job teaching English overseas that a lot of employers don't know what they're doing. And so sometimes what will happen is that they will make mistakes filling out the application and they'll screw things up, making it harder for you to actually get the job, keep the job, and go overseas. In fact, I saw on LinkedIn recently a young man had a job offer, but because the visa was taking so long, the employers decided to withdraw the offer, which is it's weird that that happened, but that's why it's so important for you to become an expert. Because if you know what it takes to get a visa, then you can make sure to educate potential employers, because that's one of the strategies you might find is helpful, is not just like getting a job offer, but making sure that they are able to support you, which I'm going to cover a little bit later in this video about that, what to look for in the research process. But keep that in mind that the first thing you want to do, the first problem you have, is understand your visa and understand what are the requirements for your visa. This is also really important for you because you may not know this, but a student visa actually allows you to work. So you may actually be eligible for employment in the US, even though you've been, sometimes employers are like, we're not eligible to sponsor you. Well, you may not need sponsorship from an employer, depending on the visa you have, depending on whether you have a 4-year degree or an MBA, you may be applicable to get job offers and work legally for a few years. So that's something you need to verify because that's going to depend from person to person, from country to country, right? So me as a U.S. citizen, like I can go get a student visa in Japan, for example. That's something I was looking at, was go, instead of get a job in Japan, I was looking at going to school in Japan, getting a student visa and working part-time. But that was something I was going to do for my own job search strategy myself. But the point I'm making is that every single person is going to have different challenges because every single country, your nationality is going to have an effect on your strategy and what visa options are available for you. So now your second problem that you as an international college student have to face is the lack of work experience. Right? Like that's something that a lot of college students have to face anyway. So I'll cover that a little bit as well at a very high level. But just understand, like you do have to address that issue. It's unfortunate, but quite a few employers value work experience over anything else. And what's going to happen is that they're going to get rejected now and then because you might have the right credentials, you might have the right education, you might have gone to an Ivy League school, you might have good additional certifications outside your college, but they're going to come back and say, but you don't have X amount of experience. You don't have X experience and X skill. So we need to address that issue as well. So make sure you keep that in mind, that you also need to be aware of the fact that because you lack work experience, you now have this additional hurdle to address. So just remember that as you're going through this job search process. All right, so now that we've talked about the problems that you are specifically going to face as an international job seeker who just graduated college, I'm going to offer you some solutions that you can implement immediately. You want to figure out like what is it that you want from a company? What is it you want from a job? Do you just want to work visa? Do you want to make a certain amount of money? Do you want to work full time, part time? What is the requirement? So remember what I said earlier. You need to become a master of the visa knowledge, and the reason that's important is that depending on the visa you have and the visa you're trying to qualify for, you might be limited in your job scope. So for example, if you want a work visa, that extends your options quite a bit. But if you're counting on your student visa to get you a job so you can stay in the country, then your options may not be as broad. So for example, for me, when I was looking to go overseas, my goal was not get a work visa. My goal was to go to Japan. And so that was my end goal. And so my options, I started doing research and saying, what are the ways I can go to Japan and stay in Japan long term? Well, option one is my landing visa, which means I can stay in Japan for 90 days as a U.S. citizen. But that's not very long. The second option, the most obvious option, the one that kept coming up over and over in Google searches, was teaching English on a work visa. That allows you to stay indefinitely. Lets you stay for as long as you have a contract with an employer. You can stay as long as you want. But there are challenges with that. I won't go into details in this video, but there are challenges with getting a work visa. And the third option for me was getting a student visa, which means you go to school in Japan and you work part-time. Now, here's the kicker, right? There's a part-time limitation. If I get a job, if I get go to school in Japan, I get a student visa, I'm only allowed to work a certain amount of hours, which means I can only take on a certain types of jobs too. I can also take certain types of jobs. Remember that in the visa, like it has to be like certain. I won't go into details because it was kind of like it wasn't clear exactly, but there were certain jobs that were I was allowed to take and certain jobs a student is not allowed to take. So whatever your strategy is going to be, you want to have your end goal in mind. Is it more important for you to live in America or is it more important for you to work in America? Because you have options. Like what if, for example, instead of working full time, you work part time, but you've still got to stay in America long term. So try to keep that in mind, what your end goals are. And that way you have like a template or a process flow or a map or whatever you want to call it for what you're looking for. The next thing you want to do is you want to use sites like Glassdoor and Quora to start researching more about like what are the things that you can do to stay in your country. So for example, for me, I would say what things Americans can do to stay in Japan. So for you, I would say whatever it is for you, jobs for international students in America, if you want to stay in America. Companies that sponsor visas, companies that sponsor work visas, companies that will allow you to work part-time on a student visa, so on and so forth. Whatever it is you need to do so that you can get a job in America. It's really important you do the research. And it's really important you start building a list of companies and industries that are likely going to work for you. So for example, I can tell you from my experience, I've noticed that quite a few consulting firms, I'm getting a lot of emails for American jobs, they're saying we are unable to sponsor visas. So that's a really good thing to know, because I'm also going to tell you that there are a handful of consulting firms I know. I know that Collabor is one of them, is a huge uh, owner of H-1B work visas. So that might be a staffing firm looking into if your goal is to stay and work full time in America, is consulting firms. That might not be the best fit for you for your industry, because for me, Collabor mainly worked in finances and consulting. So I don't know if that's going to work for your industry, if that's going to work for your field. That's why the research is so important for you. The next thing you should consider doing is informational interviews. So if you're not familiar with that, I'll give you more details in a minute. But basically, the idea behind an informational interview is you talk to someone to learn more about their job, their company, their industry, their experience. And the reason you would do this is because this allows you to get information that's not available on the internet. It's a very powerful way. This also has a second bonus, which is that informational interviews can get you connected to people in certain companies. This is actually the best way to go job searching, is networking, and informational interviews probably is the number one way to do that, because an informational interview, if done correctly, lets you connect with someone in the company who can advocate for you, get you into a company, get you or refer you to someone who is hiring, and get you a job that much faster. So I have a recommended resource for you. I'll talk about that more at the end of the video, so stay tuned. The other thing I would suggest to you is actually talking to your network in general. So your classmates, what are they doing? What is their process? And what I found consistently is that your classmates are probably one of the best sources for you as an international student specifically, because they have this entire network of people they can talk to. Like every one person, like all you need is one good contact who can open the floodgates for you. So it's really important for you to start connecting with your network, connecting with people you see on a regular basis, talking to them, learning more about them, finding out what their strategy is, what their plans are, because they may have some information that you don't. They may actually have needs for someone with a skill set like yours. So I would start talking to your classmates on a daily basis. All right, so we've talked quite a bit about how to do the research, how to get the information for what you need to do for your job search, how to find out what's the best process for you. Let's talk a little bit more about the other problem, which is your lack of work experience. And I have some solutions for you. And here's the cool thing. This is going to work for anyone, but this is something that you can do as well as a college student with no work experience. But you can do this regardless if you're a college student or you're a post-grad or if you're 30, 40, 50 years old. Anyone can do this. The first thing I would tell you, this is the first solution I have for you, and this is very specific for college students. It's probably best for recent college grads, is to go back to your coursework, right? Go back to the courses you've done and highlight those skills, right? This is something that's very valuable that you can do, because some of the classes you've taken, you can add on to that. You can talk about what courses you took in your degree and what kind of projects you worked on. So for example, I coached one student who was in the UK, and she has a bachelor's of science, and we talked about the work she did. She was running data sets and doing some business intelligence tools in college to do reporting. So I asked her to tell me more about this, and this is a very valuable thing. What she was funny to me was that the work she was doing in college is the work I was doing as an analyst, getting paid for. So she was already proving that she could actually do the work that I was doing as a six-figure analyst. So don't underestimate your coursework, because there could be golden nuggets in there that you could find very useful for your job search. That could be something that you could use to not necessarily to replace your experience, but as an example. You could be able to, so when you get questions in an interview, it's kind of jumping the gun. But if you get questions about, tell me about a time when you did this, well, you can talk about your coursework. You can talk about a project you did at school and you gave this result. So don't dismiss the value of the courses you've taken in college. There's the value there that you can use. So the second option that you could use, and you should use this one as well, is you should start volunteering. Now, you might be thinking, I don't want to spend time volunteering. It's not a good use of my time. But let me tell you that when I wanted to transition to teach English, it is because I volunteered that I was able to secure a job offer with a university in China that allowed me to get a job at university. It was a really highly competitive position. If you're not familiar with the ESL industry for universities, it's much harder to get a job in a university than it is to get a job in, say, a language center. But I knew very clearly what I wanted. I didn't want to work 40 hours a week. I wanted to work 20 hours a week. I wanted to work, I wanted to have a nice studio apartment. I didn't want to have to like worry about that stuff. So I made it my goal to get a job in a university. And I knew that getting a job at university required work experience. So I had this catch-22, like how do I get the experience to get the job? If I need the experience to get the job. So I volunteered. I volunteered during the weekends to build up my experience teaching English. And it's because I did that, is that when I went over to apply for that job, eventually get to apply for those jobs at universities, I eventually got a job offer to teach English overseas. And it was the ideal job that I wanted as opposed to just a job. So it's up to you. Volunteering also gives you the opportunity to practice the things you learned and actually develop little skills. So don't dismiss volunteering as like it's free, because it's real work you're doing. You're just not getting paid for it. All right, now the final solution I'm going to give you to help you with your resume or CV so you can get jobs that you don't have experience in is to start focusing on developing the skills you need for the jobs you want. And that's exactly what I did. So right out of college, I was kind of wayward and I didn't know what I was doing with my job search. So I got a job offer for $15 an hour, which is $30,000 a year. It's not a lot of money. This is 10 years ago too. And so that's what happened, is because I wasn't thoughtful with my research. I wasn't careful with that. And what I learned early on in my career, my first job, the second job, and third job, all paid $30,000. And what I realized was that it's skills that really drive the results. Experience is kind of like a requirement to get seen and get noticed, but the skills are the ones that are gonna skyrocket your career, so to speak. And so what I did was, in order to get the skills that I needed for the jobs I wanted, was I went on YouTube and started learning skills via YouTube videos. And for me personally, I started out as a entry-level accounting assistant. I didn't know things like how to use spreadsheets. I didn't know databases. I didn't know SQL or Tableau. But based on my research, the goal for me, the easiest way for me to start making more money, that was my goal at the time when I started working after college, was to go learn technical skills like Excel, Access, SQL, Visual Basic, Tableau, SAS, and cultivate those skills, put those on my resume, CV, LinkedIn profile. And by doing that, I was able to eventually hit six figures, even though I didn't have the right college degree and I didn't have the requisite experience. I built my own experience from learning online. And I cultivated that experience by learning those skills. So keep that in mind, that you can go get that experience right today, go on YouTube for free and learn skills. All right, so to conclude this video, we're going to summarize very quickly. I talked about you have to do two main things. You have to identify the big problems that you as an international student have to deal with, which is that your visa situation, as well as your lack of work experience. And I also gave you multiple solutions that you can implement immediately, which includes researching online, talking to your network, talking to your classmates, as well as cultivating experience as fast as you can through free resources, such as taking advantage of your existing coursework and projects and amplifying the achievements you did with that, as well as going to do volunteering work and getting free skills online through YouTube. All right, so I have a question for you. What are you going to do now that you have watched this video? What are the next steps for you? Or do you need to do more research? Do you need to find out what you need to do for your visa? Or do you need to focus more on getting the better experience? You need to focus on or do you already know what you need to do for your visa? Now you need to figure out what are the skills I need? What is the ways I can get work experience? What are the things I can do to supplement my resume or CV so it's not completely empty? Now I have a quick recommended reading for you that I think you're going to find really helpful in your job search. This is something called the 2-Hour Job Search. I'll put the link in the comments below. I highly recommend this book. I didn't get to implement it in action when I was job searching, but I did do informational interviews when I was job searching. It was very helpful. It gave me a lot of data. So I found this book recently. I found it just kind of randomly on Amazon. I've gone through it. And if I could redo my job search all over, I would go through this exact process that he recommends here. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe and check out some of the other videos I've been working on this channel. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'll see you next time, guys. Thank you. Good luck.